Hey friends, streaming live again. Hey, it's another live stream with the KetoND, Dr. G here. I wanted to do a short video following up on the video from last week regarding cancer. We are in Breast Cancer Awareness Month and kind of raised a few things, questions, comments, and things that I wanted to go over about that. So I want to go into a little more detail and relate that to some practical ways that we can address and deal with the problem with cancer. So this will be a little bit more towards breast cancer, but bear in mind this applies to most cancer prevention and even supportive of treatment options. So there are numerous types of cancer, and there are differing rates, of course, of the most common ones. And for women, the most common form of cancer is breast cancer. And in men, also prostate cancer is one of the top ones. It's down a few. In men, colorectal cancer, I believe some of the other cancers have actually had all these statistics up. Increasing rates in thyroid and pancreas cancer, as I mentioned last time. I touched on that a little bit. Here we go, stats. So this is for 2018 estimates here. 1,735,350 new cases will be diagnosed in the U.S. 609,640 people will die from the disease. These numbers are large, of course, hard to have context, but it's a big number. Most common cancers listed in descending order according to estimated new cases include breast cancer, and it looks like, I think they've just pooled all men and women together here, all age categories. So breast cancer, number one. Lung and bronchial cancers, number two. Number three, prostate cancer. And then we have the colon and rectal cancer, melanoma of the skin, bladder, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, kidney and renal cancer, endometrial cancer, leukemia, and there's pancreatic cancer, thyroid cancer, and last, liver cancer. So top areas there. So a couple of things just to make some comments about what cancer is and why these particular areas are the most common areas of cancer. And that is that cancer is an uncontrolled cellular process in which cells are rapidly dividing, and in an uncontrolled fashion, there is a loss of regulation and control, obviously, and then the end of that could be damage to areas of the body, of course, and loss of vital function. So, it's often that it's the mass that is impeding function in another area. It's not so much the cancer itself really kills one or causes as much harm as it is. It's the, byproducts of what's going on as it grows. So when cancer's in a vital area, of course, that's going to lead to more rapid decline. And the cells that are most affected by cancer are cells that typically are more rapidly growing and turning over. Things like colon and colorectal digestive cancers. This is those cells, the endothelial, epithelial cells of the body are rapidly dividing anyway. And so anywhere you have more division and also exposure to toxins, and they're going to be the most vulnerable. So now breast cancer, of course, breast tissue normally, unless a woman's breastfeeding, that tissue shouldn't be that active, but it is very vulnerable to hormones and to many of the toxins in our environment that do mimic hormones, which leads me to discuss one of the best things that any woman could do, whether you're dealing with cancer, you want to prevent, and also deal with a number of other female-related health issues when it comes to reproductive problems, problems with the menstrual cycle, uterine fibroids or ovarian cysts, irregularity, heavy periods, and anemia related to that is often this connection with the balance of hormones in a woman's body. And a woman is more sensitive to that balance because her cells have more estrogen receptors and progesterone as well. And estrogen imbalance and hormone imbalance in general in women is highly associated with lots of issues. And as it comes to cancer, we know that estrogen-sensitive cancers are, including the breast cancer, are very high in women. And what's important to realize is that we have testing methodologies now that can actually identify the imbalances and those pro-cancer like estrogen metabolites. I'm going to switch screen here as I talk about this. Let's see if we can get this to work. Here we go. Hopefully you can see this on screen. So I'm going to go over a comprehensive urine hormone panel, just skim briefly. And a number of labs offer this now, and unfortunately it's not very mainstream. And in terms of women who are dealing with everything from, heavy between periods bleeding, pain with your menstrual cycle, early menopause, hot flashes, night sweats, a decline in hormones, and imbalance in hormones, this is an important area to be tested. So before you go get, ideally, before you go get major interventional therapies, surgeries, and I know there's a place for that. Sometimes you have to get in and fix the problem, but medicine often, well, they don't look at these hormone levels and they're going to go in and let's just, for instance, remove the uterus instead of trying to correct the imbalance. Now, if there's an imbalance with these hormones, when it comes to breast cancer, you're not addressing the problem. And there's a commonality between, having a history of menstrual problems or other related hormone issues as a young adolescent woman all the way up into later adulthood that's never being addressed. So this page alone just covers, if you hopefully can see that, the estrogen and estrogen metabolites that we can pick up in just a really simple urine collection test. And what we can see is, one, do you have important estrogens that are essential for health, or and also can we see, do you have any high-risk estrogen metabolites that put you more at risk for things like breast cancer? So low estrogens are associated with things like osteoporosis, more rapid aging, frequent infection, poor healing, a decline in energy, loss of muscle mass, and a decline in brain health, an early onset of cognitive decline or dementia or even Alzheimer's associated with low estrogen. And then having high levels of certain estrogen metabolites, for instance, if you can see it in the middle of the page, it's this 4-OH estrone. That is a highly reactive estrogen metabolite that can be carcinogenic and trigger some of the overproliferation or over stimulation of breast cells, for instance, and is associated with increased cancer risks. And then on the other hand, the hormone estriol, which is up here at the top, says estriol E3. In later life, going into menopause, women who have low levels of estriol is associated with increased risk for breast cancer. And so the message out there is that estrogens can increase risk for cancer. So, birth control pills and hormone replacement therapy and exposure to estrogens of any form can increase risk. Well, that is true to a degree, but it's a little more specific to the types of estrogens that you have. So it's important to, you can have poor health by doing things to drive estrogen levels down. There are drugs and medications to do that, and sometimes that leads to problems. And then, of course, having, for instance, adrenal insufficiency in later life is associated with low estrogen, and that's also going to contribute to disease. So now how do we affect these hormone balances? Well, a couple of things. I mentioned in cancer statistics, one of the leading risk factors is obesity and weight gain. We're not just talking about obesity levels of weight gain, we're talking about even just being overweight is absolutely epidemic, as I mentioned. And having elevated levels of adipose tissue increases estrogen levels and increases these more pro-inflammatory estrogens. Fat cells actually produce estrone, one of the estrogens, and they drive a number of inflammatory pathways, including things like blood sugar imbalance, hyperinsulinemia, just very pro-inflammatory. All of the chronic degenerative diseases are associated with excess weight gain, and it's happening just across the board. Now, the liver is the primary organ that helps us metabolize these hormones. And so often when we get a test back like this, we're looking at, overall estrogen levels. Are they too high, too low? And then the different balancing of those metabolites are often controlled via the liver and its metabolism or detoxification of these hormones. And this test shows here, still on screen, phase 1 and phase 2 metabolites. Those are primarily interconnected or converted via the liver and its metabolic processes. So we know that some common deficiencies can lead to an increase in certain metabolites that shouldn't be there, and a deficiency in the ones that we would want higher levels of. And we can tell if there's an imbalance within the liver function. A few of those include some of the B vitamins, magnesium, glucarate, calcium D-glucarate's an important cofactor, and other nutrients, some of the lipotropic factors, carnitine, choline. So in any case, this test also profiles progesterone levels. This is just a test sample of a person here. It covers the androgens, so the male hormones that are also important in women, and the glucocorticoids. These are all the adrenal metabolites, those energy pathways and regulating sleep. And they've also included thyroid. And when we have a urine test, we're able to gather a lot more data in terms of overall status. And so with all of these hormones, including thyroid, we can tell more accurately what your hormone levels are. So if you have been lucky enough to have a doctor order blood hormone levels, that certainly can be helpful. However, with the combination of urine testing, you're going to get a lot more information to be able to act on and actually do something about it. So highly recommend this test. Simple test. Let's see if I can get back to go back to turning the screen off there. So anyway, I want to go through a couple of other risk factors. Now, I mentioned the diet, and this is obviously a focus for a lot of what I do. I think that diet is a foundational. I apologize that my camera might be moving here. For some reason, I'm having trouble getting it to sit straight. There we go. The other risk factors include, and I listed 3 here, diet being number 2, and diet and lifestyle. So as I mentioned last time, the ketogenic diet, low carbohydrate diet. So the genesis or the pathogenesis of cancer is now, there's a lot of controversy around it, but there's so much evidence that's accumulating that we're looking at a metabolic dysfunction within the cell that then leads to the damage to the nucleus and the DNA and the genetics of our cells, leading to this uncontrolled growth. This isn't just some shot in the dark, random bad luck. You have bad genes. Oh, you've got a sleeping cancer gene and it's just being turned on at some point. There is evidence, in fact, in the Metabolic, the book by Thomas Seyfried, he's currently doing work on cancer and has written about this and the metabolic relationship between onset of cancer. And his, I won't try to bring it up on screen, but I'll link the study. One, he has a book, Cancer is a Metabolic Disease. Again, that's Thomas Seyfried. You can find that on Amazon or elsewhere. But there's research that shows that it's this dysfunction in how the cells are metabolizing energy, and at its core, it's at the level of the mitochondria within the cytoplasm. So this is outside of the nucleus of the cell. It's kind of like having, a good analogy, if your house, is having issues with, things are starting to break apart and come apart at the seams, losing the self-regulation. And the problem is that outside there's an assault that's attacking the home. And in our cells, we're dealing with the same kind of thing inside that local environment, that cytoplasm. So around the cell membrane, you have this fluid, and there's a lot of byproducts and machinery that's going on. The mitochondria live in there. And anyway, his studies and research has showed clearly that you can induce cancer in a healthy cell by simply putting that cytoplasm and these unhealthy mitochondria into a healthy cell, and then you get the disease. And conversely, if you take a cancerous nucleus that appears to be, it's a cancerous cell, it's got an overreactive nucleus proliferating the cancer, you put that nucleus into a healthy cell, you see that the cancer reverts and becomes healthy, that nucleus and health. So there's clearly something external that's turning on the nucleus of the cell to begin to form cancer. Anyway, so a lot of technical, deep stuff that you can get into, but we do these studies, and have been doing studies for decades, and what I'd like to do is, where do we apply it to life? And so as I mentioned, the metabolic effects that you get from a low carbohydrate diet are unprecedented in terms of what you can do. There's anti-inflammatory diets, you've got the Mediterranean diet, you've got, high protein, low carb diets, you've got low fat. At the cornerstone of any of the healthy diets that we know reduce cancer risk is actually nutrient density in terms of lots of plant foods. And so I am not an advocate for a vegan vegetarian diet that has its place, but it's really that human beings need a lot of phytonutrients that come from plant foods, and we can certainly get important nutrients from animal products as well. But when it comes to cancer, things like the high fiber, high phytonutrients, there's phyto means plants, it's just those micronutrients, cofactors that we're getting from leafy green vegetables, colorful root vegetables. There's so many different herbs and vegetables that we should be eating and consuming. Cruciferous, the onion, garlic family, roots and herbs and spices, turmeric, and cultures that do more with spices often have tons of more, they've got a lot more antioxidant effects in the diet when you eat very botanically dense diet. And on the other hand, the high refined carbohydrates and high starch diet that gives you lots of sources of glucose are going to have a negative effect. And so even if you don't embark on a strict ketogenic diet, I can't emphasize enough the plant-based diet. The plant-based, animal products, fine. But, the American Cancer Institute, or one of the organizations many, many years ago, came out and said that, we could lower cancer rates drastically with a intake of 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. Now, I de-emphasize fruits for obvious reasons, and because most of us, you hear fruits and vegetables and we hear fruits. I like fruit, tastes better, so I'll eat the fruit, and that's the equivalent of vegetables. Well, it's not. There are healthy fruits, but we eat too much fruit in this culture. Now, of course, lifestyle, so exercise, improved movement. I mean, this is of all sorts. It improves detoxification, improved respiration, we're moving fluids, we're, generally, if you're exercising, you're going to drink more, get more hydrated if you're on top of that. But actually, number one, I had listed mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. This is so important. If you want to reduce your risk for lots of health issues, that needs to be an area that's addressed. If there is, a chronic dis-ease in your mental, emotional state, do whatever you can. That's not an easy answer, and I can't speak to your individual situation, but seeking out things that are fulfilling, hobbies, and especially in interpersonal relationships. It could be through a health provider and through counseling, but work through those issues, and you have to find ways to be able to, let go of some of the mental, emotional scars that we carry, because that will debilitate your health. It affects your hormones, your stress level, and so it's vitally important. And then specifically, the last area is your specific individual health issues that might be going on. So, there could have been a past or even current infection that's undetected. You could have, from overextended stress, you have depleted hormone levels that need to be addressed. You may have had a car accident or a trauma to where the body, this chronic state of inflammation has continued, whether it's, joint pain, chronic headaches. We need to address those and look at those individual concerns. And then lastly, and it's not really included in this discussion, but is to talk about genetics in terms of, we think of genetics as the sort of our blueprint that we cannot change and we've inherited, and that is our lot in life. As it's turning out more and more, the genetic side of what's causing your health problems is minimal, except for some, extreme conditions, and that's obviously real. There are genetic defects that lead to problems, but a lot of the genetics have to do with how they're turned on. So our genes are our blueprint. The environment, and this is where mental, emotional, and lifestyle comes in, our blueprint gets turned on or turned off depending on what we're doing, what we're seeing, thinking, what we're eating, just breathing, going out and getting fresh air, looking at the blue sky, holding your kid, giving someone a hug, petting your pet, or, it's all those have an important health effect. And so the counterpart, of course, there could be detrimental effects. So again, genes, you're not set in life with that, and you can really, really alter that. So I'll just kind of wrap this up. I would say definitely consider the hormone testing. Last video I talked about the stool analysis for looking for things like dysbiosis. I would say between hormones and chronic infections, these are our two top areas where there are hidden risk factors that aren't being looked at. It's easy to know typically if you're not eating well. So if you're under too much stress. But sometimes we need to look a little bit deeper and screen for these hormone imbalances. And I will continue to go into a little bit more. I think next time I will go through some standard comprehensive blood panel also. So many of you have probably gotten blood work done by a provider, and I can go over what I would typically look for and things you could ask for to get completed. And that will give you an indication of maybe where additional testing might be required or where you should focus your attention on your health. So well, that's it for now. I will put some links below to the book, Thomas Seyfried's book. Also, there's another excellent book. It's a little dense, but it's a great book on tape if you're going to be doing a road trip, called Tripping Over the Truth by Travis Christofferson, and gives a whole background to this whole thing with cancer and where we are and where we've come from. So be proactive, get out there, get some exercise, look at doing some dietary changes, and do that now as we're winding down the year before the holidays and before the new year, and get ready for having another healthy year. So anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. We'll see you in the next video.